Okay, we have Lisa Misko, Brian Buback, and Ned Barnes. They all represent every life, the whole life continuum. Lisa has an 8-year-old, Brian has a 16-year-old, and Ned has our resident celebrity, Allison, who is 30, just turned 37. Okay, so I think we can probably answer all of your questions. So we're going to start the question with, I would like each of you guys to please introduce yourself and tell us about your warrior, and then what age was your warrior diagnosed?
Okay, well, I'm Lisa again. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin with my husband, Thor. He's the one running the show over there. And we have 3 kids. Riker is our middle child. He's 8. And then we have a 6-year-old girl and a almost 13-year-old girl. So, so Riker was diagnosed when he was about 17 months old. Should have been sooner. I think we all feel that same way. But we had to wait a little bit to get the testing. So yeah, he was diagnosed about that age. Did you want me to talk more about him, or is that's good?
Let's just go down the line.
Hi, wow, this is weird. And this is weird for me to be up here, so bear with me. I don't know, I'm a little nervous about this, but my name is Brian Buback. My son's Parker. Well, I'm better known as Parker's dad around here, I guess. But he's a super loving, compassionate kid. Love having him. In fact, I was up at lunch in my room, and he handed me this note that says, "You got this, Dad." So that's the kind of kid he is, right? So it's been wonderful. But I live in Boston with my wife, Parker, who's 16, and then we have an 18-year-old daughter who just started college. So she's down at University of Richmond in Virginia. So Parker's 16. Oh, he was diagnosed at 11, just before COVID. So we had 11 years of really trying to figure out. We knew something was wrong, didn't know what. Somebody at one point had said, "Do you think he has Williams syndrome?" I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but he always listens to music. I was like, that's got to be it. We had him tested. It was negative. So I went back and said, "No, it's got to be Williams syndrome." And they were like, "Nope, it's still negative." Finally, they did the full exome test and came back and said, "We found out what he's got. Good news is we found out what he has. The bad news is nobody else will know what it is." So, and then they handed us a Facebook group, and we were off. So that's how we ended up here.
Nobody will know yet. It's coming. They're going to all know. The word's getting out. I am Allison's dad. We live in northwestern Ohio, and I'll just start with my numbers. That's the quickest way to do this. Husband 43, father 8, grandfather 12, great-grandfather 1. So that sort of spells out who I am. My oldest is 41, Allison's oldest brother. Our youngest is 15. She's up in the room. She's a little on the spectrum. And by night, I'm a sleep tech. By day, I'm avocationally a music teacher, deacon, worship leader, and home referee and dad joke specialist. So I do that quite well. My warrior, Allison, right over there, Allison Corey Barnes, 37 yesterday. Everybody knows that. Thank you, by the way, for wishing her happy birthday. That really meant a lot to her. Let's see, she is the 3rd out of 8 in birth order. And she was a puzzlement to us for a lot of years, but she was diagnosed finally when she was 26, which was 2015, or 2014. So she was one of the earlier ones on there.
So what type of challenges did you guys face when they were young, and then maybe compare them to the challenges that you're facing now at this current age? Brian, you want to start with? Oh.
Sure. Yeah. So again, we knew something was different about him, and we kept searching for answers. He had the hypotonia, which we've heard of several times today, so low muscle tone. He was late to reach most of his milestone goals, or right on that threshold of almost late. So we did get him started an early intervention, and OTA we started pretty early. But again, the hardest part of it was there were strange things happening, and whether it was some defiant behaviors, even as a small child, and we just couldn't understand why. So that was the toughest part for us. I mean, he definitely lacks self-control, particularly around food and especially candy. That absolutely, it's nuts how feverish he gets when he doesn't get candy. Food, we actually have an alarm on our pantry because if we left it open, we would have no more food left in the house. So like he has to ask, hey, can you unlock the pantry so I can get something out? It seems so barbaric, but it's the only way that we've been able to kind of control it. So, I mean, I guess as far as challenges, it was all of those, but the sanity came with the diagnosis. It was like, okay, we finally have a reason. Again, we didn't really understand what WSS was, and hence probably the same as you guys and why you're here, but we're learning every day, so.
It's not barbaric. We have a lock on our safe, on our pantry as well.
We have the opposite problem. My child will not grow. Our issues started the moment he was born. He was full term, but when he was born, he aspirated meconium and was whisked off to the NICU. I didn't get to see him right away, and it just all started there. He was so floppy, as they would say. They couldn't figure out why he had very low muscle tone, and he got hospitalized, I think, every month the first year he was born, from RSV to bronchiolitis to aspirating. When he was 3 months old, he was hospitalized for the aspiration, and that's when our amazing GI doctor, he was the one on our side, decided there's something going on. So he said, let's go to the hospital, and he ran every single test. I don't know how he knew where to start, but he started with his brain, and they did a brain MRI, and to the best of his ability, he was 3 months old. So, and that's where they found out he had, his corpus callosum wasn't fully formed. They don't know why or what would become of that. They weren't sure if he had a stroke because he couldn't hold still for the MRI. And then from there, they did an echo of his heart, and then they found out he had a bicuspid aortic valve. And then from there, they decided to do his kidneys. Again, I don't know how they knew where to go, but they just went from one thing to another, and I'm like, what else? What else? And then he has horseshoe kidneys, so his kidneys are fused. So that wasn't too much of an issue. I guess a lot of people have that, they don't even realize it. So it was right away, and then he didn't hit any milestones. At 6 months old, he could barely hold his head up still. At 1, he couldn't even sit up. He started crawling maybe at like 18 months, kind of, and did start walking eventually about after 3. We are pretty lucky. Riker is extremely sweet and caring and loves to be with his family and really doesn't give us many issues. I always say my girls are the hard ones. Not my boy. He just loves to be around his family and his friends, and we basically just put out fires as they come. As I say, we keep finding new diagnoses as they come, and it took me a while to accept the diagnosis and accept that, you know, he may not meet those milestones, and that's okay. I'm just happy with how he's going to be, and I'm just very thankful I have him. So, yeah.
Sometimes we just have to make the decision just to love them. Just right now, that's our biggest job, just to love them.
As many of you may have experienced, our first few years with Allison were very difficult. Her failure to thrive was a real issue. I mean, after the first year, she was what, like 14 pounds? Couldn't really even sit up much. I mean, and the real trouble was keeping food down. She was the happiest of all of our 8 kids at that age. I mean, we would feed her and try to burp her, and all of a sudden she'd throw it all up, and she'd be just smiling and happy, and we're like, no, we want you to live. You know, it's like, it was a real struggle. In fact, it got to be within the first year and a half, my wife took about 3 months and just figured, she's a nurse, she just figured for herself she's going to stay home sequestered with Allie just to get her well. Her immune system was so bad, she was catching everything, and it was just going down and down and down. Just to get her well, she stayed home, and thank God she did, and she started turning around a little bit. Got so bad, the pastors even came over and anointed her and prayed over her, I mean, just to make sure she would make it. So that was pretty rough, and you know, we didn't worry much about milestones. We just wanted her to live. So, but thank God she has lived. At age 4, we got a little bit concerned about all the hairy arm and things that we noticing that weren't like what we noticed with other kids. And so we took her to University of Michigan. They had a lot of specialists in the room. This poor little kid's standing on the examining table, and all these specialists are walking around thinking, there's something here, we just don't see it in our syndromology books, but someday they'll find it. Well, they have. So it just took till 2012 to find it. So.
Does anybody have anything else that they want to add to that? Okay. I want to transition over to education because I have a feeling that we'll get a lot of questions about that. Before I move on to education, does anybody have a specific question for any of these people? We'll have a formal Q&A afterward, but we can do very specific questions now. Okay. Oh, Christine.
You hit upon, I think, this a little bit, but I wanted to dig a little deeper. For those of us in the room who just got the diagnosis and you're processing all of this overwhelming thoughts, feelings, we're in this, I was in a dark tunnel, I think, for a few months, up to a year. Like, what's your advice for those of us who are in that part of the journey?
I guess I'll start it since I have the microphone. For Allison, it was extremely cathartic. It's worth pursuing no matter what you're doing. Some people said they had to look into different states to get to somebody who can help with the diagnosis or find a diagnosis. It is definitely worth pursuing. When we found out, it finally answered a lot of our questions. Okay, there is something, and it's something that is a real thing that's not like, Mosaic, Downs, or something else that was thrown around about Allie, but now we know what it is, and it's just that we need to get the doctors to know what it is. But at least it was something that sort of explained to her, she was 26 when she found out, part of what's going on with her life, and it was very helpful for her. So if you're in the process, it's worth everything you do and spend to pursue about it.
Yeah, I would say lean in and embrace it. When Parker got diagnosed, my wife was in tears, and it was really sad. For me, there was sanity. There was a reason, but she was struggling accepting it. And then we didn't say anything to most of the community for about 9 months. And then I finally put up this gigantic Facebook post and basically said, hello world, like this is what's going on, and this is why Parker, you've seen Parker, and your kids have noticed that he's weird and everything else, and just kind of let everybody know and say, this is our story, and now I hope that you can accept it and accept him for what he is, because I don't think he was being accepted before that, and it was really sad. So the more we embraced it, I think the more, and for me, this Facebook group that we're part of, I went back today because I was remembering when I signed up for it, and had a particular incident where we were at my daughter's basketball game, and we walked in, Parker said, hey, can I get those gummy snacks? They were $1. And just being me, we were trying to get to the game. No, come on, let's go. What? No? Like he just blew up in front of everybody. It was so embarrassing. He started getting aggressive with me. I had to basically put him over my shoulder and walk out. And I got home that night and I sat down in that Facebook group, and it was cathartic. I just started writing. This happened to me and it was embarrassing, and within minutes I had people responding saying, it's happening to all of us and you're not alone, and it was just like, oh my God, it felt so good. So I think the more you can embrace it, the more you can lean on this community, the better off you'll be. So,
Brian, when you posted on Facebook to your community in Boston, did it change? Did that improve?
When I posted the what?
When you posted to your network.
Absolutely. And it was in that too as well. Like started getting posts from people, oh my God, we love Parker. Like you just started getting all of this positive affirmation of what a great kid he is. But I think the people started to see him a little bit differently. And sometimes I feel bad, but even today, like the first thing I tell people as soon as I meet people is he's special needs. And it's kind of a defense mechanism for me. And sometimes I feel bad because I feel like I'm not allowing him to blossom, but I want to protect myself too, because I don't want to feel like I'm just waiting for something to happen where they're going to look at me differently. So I don't know. I think there's mixed emotions on whether I should be just screaming it out to the world, telling them he's special needs, but.
I think a lot of people here can relate to that.
Yeah, everything everybody said. I always say when Riker was diagnosed, I went through the grieving process, like literally every emotion through the grieving process. And I don't think you know how you're going to react until you're in it. And I know me and Thor were completely different. I was really sad. I was really upset. And I just felt like if it was something physical about him, we can deal with that, we'll figure it out. But it was the more like the neurological things that I had no experience about, nor do I know how to take care of a child like that. But I eventually got there, and I think that's okay that you don't get there right away. I think that it took me a few years even to accept it, because I kept, all the therapists, everybody kept saying, he'll get there, he'll do it. And I'm like, well, what if he doesn't, And I think that's okay if he doesn't. We try, and if we get there, we do, and if we don't, that's okay too. So for me, it was difficult, but yeah, same thing about having this community. I mean, when we went to the geneticist, they literally had no answers. They said, here's a Facebook group. And I'm like, okay, we'll follow up with you. And then they didn't. And so we got this community of people that I've said this before, is the most supportive support group I've ever been in my entire life. I mean, I'm in a few local ones, and even those get a little crazy some days, and this is the most supportive group of people I have ever met. I always say we have friends throughout the whole world, and it's just such a positive community, and so I'm very thankful for that. So that's where we go to when we have questions. So.
Okay, let's talk about education. Brian and Lisa, both of your kids are currently in the U.S. education system right now. What are your experiences in public education, and what are your challenges right now? And then maybe afterward, Ned,
Sure.
you can talk about what Allison's were and what helped.
I'll try to be brief. Well, we chose public education. We live in a small village in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it is well known for having an amazing special education program. So right from the start, he was in early childhood. So at 3, he didn't even walk, and he's going to early childhood. And for us, it was difficult. He has severe separation anxiety, so just being somewhere else without me was our goal. So he did that first, and then COVID happened, and he stayed home for 4K, so I was his teacher. And then he ended up going back for kindergarten. I decided, since it was COVID and he didn't go to school for a whole year, to only do a half day. And that was something I could do in public education. I just had to sign off that he wasn't getting his full curriculum, but I felt like a full day wasn't going to be right for him. And he also has a G-tube, amongst other things, so I was a little nervous about him getting G-tube feeds at school, and I wasn't quite ready to let that go. So we just did half day, and 2 weeks in, he was still crying, going, but then it just reversed, and he loved it there. He is very accepted by his peers. I call him a celebrity there. Well, they actually call him a celebrity there. Everybody in the hallway is like, Riker, high five. They always try to get his attention, and he just loves it. First grade, he went full days. I decided to go for it. I was hoping he would have enough energy to get through his day, and they were very accepting. He has an IEP, he has a health plan, so that's with his G-tube feeds. So he had training, or people had training there to get those done, and people were very willing to do that. We even have an amazing principal that does his G-tube feeds as well, so he's in the rotation. Heaven forbid somebody else was sick or couldn't be there. And he is in 3rd grade now, and again, he's not doing what 3rd graders do. I said, my goals for him is that he's happy, healthy, and safe. For me, safety was big at school, so not to have, he has one-on-one on certain areas, and other times he's in small groups, but he really thrives being with his peers. So they try to keep him in the classroom. He's in an inclusive classroom, so he's in the classroom as much as he can, and when he has occupational therapy, speech, they even do that right outside his classroom, because he likes to be close by. But they've been really great at, anytime I talk or have questions, they really listen. So, but it's not always like that. That's why I say that's not everybody's experience. We were just very lucky to have a really supportive special education there.
So we chose public school, but we didn't have a diagnosis until he was in like 5th or 6th grade. So it was a real struggle to try to get services. I don't know if you guys have experienced that, but you really have to fight And we kept being told that he was normal and on grade level and he was thriving. And we were like, no, he's not. There's a lot of problems here. And obviously they don't want to pay for extra services because it's money out of the school's pocket. So it was really tough to get anything done. Around fourth grade, it became very apparent that he was not like the other kids, just as far as peer interaction just wasn't going well. And Parker's got a really strong fight or flight reflex. When he feels threatened or not secure or whatever it might be, you get some pretty extreme behaviors. And that's really what happened in fourth grade. And I think the school saw that. And even though we didn't have a diagnosis, the school decided, I think the lady that was speaking earlier was talking about out of district. So the public school said he needs to go out of district. So in Massachusetts, they actually have to pay for a private school that has a program for Parker. So that's where we ended up. Now, once we got the WSS diagnosis, things became much easier for us. So for those that have young kids, I think you're in much better shape than we were because you have an answer, you have something to at least describe it. But for us, it was a real struggle, and it still is today. We struggle with finding the right fit for him, even with a private school. He's been through several. He's just a very unique kid. He doesn't fit into any of the buckets. They try to put him with the autistic kids. He's not fitting in there. They try to put him with behavioral kids. He doesn't fit in there. It's been a real struggle, to be honest. So.
By the time in the early 90s Allison reached school age, we had begun with her older brothers to homeschool, so we figured that would be the best way we could handle with Allison. And we were noticing at that point a lot of anomalies in, just her growth and her development, and it really helped to have mom there be the teacher, which was what she experienced all throughout her primary and secondary education, was mom being the teacher. And in our area, there wasn't a whole lot of real good special education that we would trust, so that really worked out to Allison's advantage and our advantage because Karen could keep on top of everything and was responsible for reporting her curriculum, which we got a curriculum from a private Christian school that we trust, and now some of our younger kids still are enrolled with them. But we got that curriculum, and she would be the one overseeing that and able to take her through the times of testing and the times of competency, because Allie was at a different level of achievement than other kids. And with that being something that we could buffer as mom being teacher as well as mom, that really worked out. Allison has graduated and has a high school diploma, and that's because mom stayed home and homeschooled not only the other kids, but Allie, knowing specifically as she was growing what she needed more than what any sort of school system might have been able to ferret out.
Does anybody have any questions for the panel that's specific to education?
Hello. So this is just kind of a question for you guys, and I mean, even everybody else here. My son is 8. He was diagnosed at 1.5. The last 2 school years, towards the end, we have our final IEP meeting, and the last 2 years, they have, wanted to hold him back. My feeling towards it is he's been showing progression. He's very kind. He's very social. He gets along with everybody. I didn't see a good reason, because this isn't something that's going to go away, right? He has an excellent team and support behind him. So it's been me. Sorry. It's been me making the decision to continue pushing him forward because, like you, I think it's good for him. He has great friendships, and I think that it would actually be harder on him if we held him back. So I'm just curious of your thoughts on that, or if any other parents have thoughts on that.
I agree. I mean, again, this is a personal opinion, but where I've heard from our special education team that they feel like it hurts them more than helps them. Again, with the social aspect of it, that they're behind their peers that they followed. And it's the same with us. He's not doing what the 3rd graders are doing, not even close. Riker's nonverbal. but he's with his peers that he feels comfortable with, and they have goals set for him. One of his goals is that he attends to a task for 30 seconds. So if he's meeting his goal, then we move up to the next goal. It doesn't matter what goals it is, as long as he is meeting, towards his goals. I would never hold him back either. I mean, where we are too, he can stay till he's 21, and we'll see how it goes, from each year to year. But I personally would not. And it is hard because, like, if you have a team that doesn't see eye to eye with you, you feel like you're at this table and everybody's looking at you, and you have to fight for your child around these 8 people. I don't know how many people are on your team, but he's got like 8 or 10, and it's hard. It's emotional. And, another thing at the IEP that worked for me is I had one of his previous special ed teachers he had in kindergarten became a friend, and she got promoted to be like a behavioral specialist there. But I had her come to the IEP with me to advocate for him when I was not really understanding what they were going to be doing, and I was afraid they were going to slide something in there that I didn't understand. And that was the best thing I ever did, was to bring someone else that specialized in it. I know that there's sometimes each state is different, but that you can call upon to have an advocate at your IEP. So just to have someone on your side, so you're not there alone, is just good advice. So
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Great point. We actually hired an advocate to come with us, and we needed it because the school was fighting us so hard. And she would tell us, she's like, "I'm the hammer. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to beat the hell out of them. And you guys just sit there and smile and nod your head, like, yeah." And it helped immensely, because honestly, who knows what we don't know, right? Thankfully, my wife is a second grade teacher, so she'd been through a lot of IEP meetings, and she kind of knew what's available and what's not. But to the average person, I didn't even know what services he was eligible for. So with an advocate, they go in there and they can help guide you through it. And again, they can be the hammer so that you don't look like the bad guy. I would strongly suggest that. And we ended up even hiring a lawyer at one point, because when the school started to push back, it was like, and as soon as they see a lawyer's involved, they start to do at least work with you. So.
And I can only add generalistically, don't forget, you're the best advocate your child has. They have people who will sit around the table with you who just have big words and big theories, but they don't know your child like you know your child. You are the front line, whether you hire somebody like Brian did here, which is awesome, by the way. I mean, get some teeth involved in there, but you need to have that final say, because you're number one, and they aren't.
You don't have to sign that IEP just because they choose it. Like, my son's just got sent, we just had it this week, it's 39 pages. I'm like, I will look over that when I have time, but I'm not signing off on it until I make sure everything's on there. You have to agree. You are part of the team. It's not just them are the team, you are the team too. So, yeah.
I actually want to chime in on this one. We held our son back at kindergarten. And so he did kindergarten twice. And that turned out to be a good decision for us. We wouldn't have held him back anytime except for kindergarten. After that, he's still missing the friends that he had that first time. So even he was graduating, he was in 5th grade and he was seeing all the 6th graders graduate, and he was like, oh, those were my people. It turned out to be a good decision. That was sad, but he was so young. The school cannot retain you without your permission. Just that is very important that you know. Also, with an IEP, there are 2 places that you need to sign on an IEP. There's 2 signatures. One that you're present, and one that you agree. You definitely need, during the IEP, you need to sign the part that you were present, but you do not have to sign that IEP when you're there. I actually, unless it goes swimmingly, I encourage you not to sign the IEP until you take it home and really look at it. And so many families don't know that they don't have to sign the IEP. When it comes to your school district, you are in charge. You don't feel like you're in charge, but you are the one who's driving that entire meeting. So please know that.
They
know
were
I'm the
even
moderator
saying
on
for
top.
Riker, one of his goals was they still want him to learn the ABCs, and he is just not. It's not his jam, and he does not want to do it. And so I'm like, hey, why don't we? And then I threw out, and I'm like, why don't we try sight words, And they're like, huh. I never thought that, I'm like, because he knows how to call me on the Alexa. He can see my name, so he remembers that word. And so it's like, you just, so don't be afraid to say anything.
So, yeah, Shelby, here. Thank you. Hi, I'm Shelby. Thank you guys so much. It's my first time, so I'm so excited to learn a lot. My question is about education. We live in Los Angeles, and we didn't get our diagnosis until 10 years old, but we didn't have any health problems. I was shocked to hear that anything was different about her. And so she was at a private school, mainstream private school. She went to a mainstream private elementary. Never were there any red flags. So in, I believe, third grade, they all of a sudden were like, her reading comprehension isn't great. And she has ADHD, so I thought, well, that's just typical. They essentially kicked us out of our school that we had been at for 8 years, because I have an older daughter, and basically held a blue book at me, the book of diagnosis, and said, we've done all we can for Sophie, and we don't know what else to do for her. Unbeknownst to me, I again didn't know anything other than the math. So my question is, we then moved her into another independent school that is more, I guess they're just more nurturing. They allow someone to push in with her. We have people that work with her. However, it's kind of, I think my struggle is, where does she fit in? She appears very mainstream. She could tell you anything about Olivia Rodrigo, Taylor Swift, Sephora. She could list every single, TikTok, every single thing in mainstream life. And she's a very good reader. She knows, her times tables and all of that. However, what I'm not understanding is what should be, she's in 5th grade. What is the place for her?
Well, I'm going to pass this on because my son is nonverbal, but I will say that, by us, there's a lot of, Lutheran schools, Catholic schools. The rules don't apply to them like public schools. They have to meet his needs. They have to. But the other schools don't, if they're not the public schools. Yeah. They can't. Yeah, well, and because I have another friend who has a different diagnosis, but he is in a walker. He can't walk very far, and he was at St. Paul's Lutheran School, and they couldn't said, well, we can't take care of him because they have stairs, and they don't even have an elevator, but they don't have to deal with that, so he has to go to a different school, which I find just appalling. But yeah, so if you're in public school, they have to by law meet his needs. But I know that you're more in.
So, for instance, we have 2 schools that are for children with learning differences in Los Angeles. They made me submit her neuropsych report with her, what's it called, IQ. And they said her IQ is too low for her to be at this school. Even though she's an amazing reader, social, you would not, there's really no difference other than the math, really, and I guess maybe the reading comp. But so it got so frustrating because I was like, where does she fit in? Because she doesn't appear to be special needs, I guess.
Is the only reason that they don't want her there because of the programming of the school, or is it her relationships with peers? Is it?
No, I think really what it was I think it had to do with the new head of school. It's very complicated. My husband's on the board of the school. We were blindsided and shocked. But, that's my other question. Do we share the diagnosis? because I never have, because I'm worried that, like in our past situation with this private school, when they said, we don't know how to help her, I felt like if I didn't know the diagnosis at that time, but once I had it, I felt like all they have to do is Google it and they'll say, see, she has an intellectual disability. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I shared earlier, we struggle so hard with the right school, and Parker's on his 4th private school in the last like 5 years, and every time he gets there, he starts off well, and then it becomes a problem, and he's got behaviors, and then they look at it, and to your point, I think they say, WSS, we've never seen another kid with WSS. We don't know how to treat this, you've got to take him someplace else. And so we're getting shuffled from school to school to school, and honestly, Donna and I said, we're like, we don't even care. We know he's probably at the max that he's going to learn. Like, I don't think he's going to be a mathematician. I just want him to go to school every day. I want him to have relationships. I don't care about the academics. Like, just get him in a structure and get him like socializing with other kids, some sort of normal life, right? I mean, he spent the first 6 weeks of this school year at home with me because we didn't have a school for him. So it's been a real struggle.
So my daughter, she was in a mainstream private school, and she just got diagnosed a year ago too, around the same time as Shelby's daughter. And really no issues. And then she had the brain surgery, needed a lot of therapies. So we did this neuropsych evaluation. It came back that she had holes in her learning. Her IQ also showed that she was lower. So we went to our public school. It told them exactly what she had. This is her neuropsych. And they put her in a special, and you would never know, even has WSS, okay? And it's because she's social, she's verbal, she had, you just wouldn't know. So they, based on the evaluation, they put her into a special needs, and these children, had severe disabilities, and the teacher came to me and said, we need to revise her IEP. She does not qualify to be in here. Even though she tested low, she's like, she functions way higher. She goes, I did she did her testing without her knowing she was testing her. And she goes, and she functions so much higher than what these test scores are. So I will say, these kids, I think with anxiety, they test lower sometimes than they actually can perform. So I was relieved to know, okay, she needs to be in a mainstream classroom, but she's gonna be pulled every subject to get that extra support. And she's doing so well, I'm so happy I pulled her. That's right, but a lot of these, schools though, right, they should be doing that, exactly. So I think it all depends on your school district.
The other thing I'll say though is, I think WSS kids in general, and Parker certainly, is very strong verbally and with a vocabulary. It is very deceiving. Everybody thinks he's way higher functioning than he is, and that's exactly what happened in elementary school. Is they basically said he's right on track, and it was like, no, he's not. He can't even add 2 simple numbers, but he has a vocabulary of like 10-letter words, and he's fine. Like, it was crazy. So be very careful about the verbal piece. People are going to think your child is much further along, and they're going to tell you that they are. Make sure that you've got those testing numbers to back it up, though.
I think we're outlining sort of a similarity between a lot of the Wiedemann-Steiners as they grow. The linguistics and the social is really high, but then people expect that everything else should be there, and it's not. And that's when things fail, but the highness of the social and linguistics sort of put them out of the category that they're looking. When we get that clinical sheet that's going to give the diagnosis and what it means, I mean, that's going to help us all be able to hand that sheet to people who are in IEPs and people we have to show what the diagnosis is and how to treat it. They're going to see then they're high usually in linguistics and social, but everything else, especially math, sequencing, really challenged. So,
I have one last question on education.
I was just going to add into this. Nathan, he's 19 and just graduated with a modified diploma this last June. He was not diagnosed till, 13, 15? So we had an IEP long before we had a diagnosis, and it showed up in 3rd grade but Before that, he was in the highest reading group because he could read anything you put in front of him. But in third grade, they want to know your reading comprehension, and that's where I think these WSS kids fall short, is in the comprehension. Nate will read the same line twice and not even realize he read the same line twice because he's not comprehending what he's reading. And so he went from the highest reading group to the lowest reading group, and that's when the school started testing him for, learning disability in reading. And then math, he, just now finally figured out how to move the decimal point one place to get 10%. He's 19. We're excited about that. And then he had a learning disability in math. And they told us that we should go get him tested because with the medical diagnosis, when you're having these issues with your IEP plan and they're pushing back on it, if you have a medical thing, at least in Oregon, if you have a medical thing, they have to listen to it. If it's their testing, they can wiggle out of it. But if you have that medical thing, they have to give you the services that you need. So having the testing was good, but like I said, we didn't get his diagnosis for another 3 or 4 years after that. And then once we did that, we have definitely shared it with the school because, like I say, with that in hand, they couldn't turn us down with things. When we needed, if he needed more time for a test or if he needed to retake tests, they had to help him. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. So I'd like to transition over to services, and I'm specifically talking to services outside of the school district. What services do you think helped your child the most, and or what services do you wish were made available to you or you wish you had signed your child up for?
With Allison, it was roughly about 16 years old when we finally got her with our county board of DD for services. Initially, it wasn't a lot, but it did help us because they did small things like counsel Karen on, well, when she's 18, you better get guardianship because, a lot of things that legally function there. And they also, once she did graduate, then offered, the sheltered workshop so that she had a place to work and some day hab situations. We also, from the county, get hippotherapy or therapeutic horseback riding paid for. So those services, as she was older as a teen and then getting out of school, really helped her transition into a lifestyle that was functional for us and for her. So that's what it meant for us.
I wish my wife was here because she would be able to answer this question better than me. But services, so she's a second grade teacher, so she knew kind of OT and speech. So even though we didn't have the WSS diagnosis, my wife was kind of all over it. So when he did finally get diagnosed, we felt like we had OT and early intervention, and he still goes to OT private. In fact, so as far as that goes, I think, I don't know of any services that we were missing, but I'm sure I'm wrong if my wife was here.
Okay, I got a lot, but I'm just gonna say first, well, we live in Wisconsin, so you have to look in your state. But one thing that really helped was there's a service called Katie Beckett, and I think it's, I could be wrong, national, but in Wisconsin, it's Katie Beckett. So we have Anthem insurance, but Riker gets Medicaid as secondary, and that was a miracle because our therapy only covered, I think, 15 therapy sessions. Well, he was going to therapy 4 days a week. So they only covered it for like 3 weeks. Well, he's going to need that for the rest of his life. So that was one thing that helped. And then there's a children's long-term support waiver. That's in Wisconsin, but I know that it could be called something else in another state. Look into that. They covered, he's got a push chair because he tires easy and just decides not to walk. And so if that wasn't covered by insurance, but I fought to get it covered, they would pick that up. They got him a car seat because he's not a baby anymore, but he needs a 5-point harness. What do? They only go up to a certain, weight. So that, and they cover passes to go to the zoo each year, Discovery World, which is in Milwaukee. So that was huge. And that was something people don't realize they had. It's just not out there. I wish you get a diagnosis, you have a child that has medical diagnosis or disability, they should say, hey, these are all the services you have. Please look into this. No, I had to just stumble upon them. For us, therapy-wise, he was in every therapy you could think of from birth. We have done OT, PT, speech, play therapy, music therapy. He was doing feeding therapy. We tried every kind of feeding therapy, and it was just too much. And this was us personally. That's what I want to say. We chose to, at a certain point, it wasn't beneficial for him. He gets it through school, so he gets OT, PT not at the moment, but he will in middle school. We don't have any stairs by us, and so he's safe. And speech at school, he gets that a couple times a week, and that's enough for him. For him, it was quality of life for us, and it was not working. And he's got 2 siblings, so I had to think about time and energy. And for him, being around a therapist he's not comfortable with, he's not going to work. So for us, we kind of tapered down our therapy as he got older, and I'm happy we did. So yeah, I kind of just choose it as it comes. Same thing with medical things, I think. Is doing this test going to help him in the long run, or to put him through that? So, yeah.
Let me expand that up into adulthood, because as they get to be 18 and majority age, then you really got to think about Medicare disability. I mean, once you have the diagnosis, start applying for that. With the Medicaid, that helps out a lot, like you're saying it. But once they get to be an adult, Allie now has the Medicare and Medicaid, which she can do the dual plans and all that and choose. But that is a huge help for her, because the things she requires with all her allergies and everything are far beyond what my very limited major medical can handle, and so it's really good for her. The other thing is support, like SSI and SSDI. I mean, for actual monetary support from Social Security. I mean, once they're 18, begin looking into that, because that's going to help you as a family hugely.
I know you want to. Go ahead. I was just going to say respite. People don't realize, I don't know if you know what respite is, but it's care for your child so you can get rest. That's what I think of it. And that's through for us, the Children's Long-Term Support Waiver. And so he gets respite. My parents are respite providers. They get paid to take care of him so I can have time away. So look into that as well.
Did you try any alternative therapies?
Ooh, I don't know. Do you remember? I mean, for us, maybe the weirdest, not weirdest, but it was like music therapy. I thought maybe he can't talk, so maybe he could sing. Maybe that would, and so we didn't try anything too, I would say, different that way, but.
Yeah, for us, the hippotherapy has been very good. The horseback riding is really, there's something about horses connecting with people with special needs. It really is working. And for Allie, it's worked for years. Also, you mentioned music. We found out sort of in a funny way once that music triggers her memory, because she doesn't remember a lot about her early days. She has to rely on mom and dad to tell her how it was when she was 4 or how it was when she was 6. But when she hears certain songs that were being played back then when she was 4 or 6 or 8, it triggers scenes in her mind that she can start remembering those. That's sort of interesting.
We did try ABA therapy. I know that is sometimes a word people don't like to talk about. For us, it was great. We chose a place that was more life skills. It was play. There was nothing forced upon him, but we did that for 2 years while he was, before he went to school full time, and it was just amazing. It was a lot having someone there, but he learned, he couldn't even wear headphones. They did a tolerance, he wore it 1 second at a time. Now he wears them all the time. He's got a chewy clip because he puts things in his mouth, wouldn't even take that. They started with 2 seconds and got up to wearing it all day. I mean, that was an amazing thing for us too, to have that access to.
Okay. Oh, we have some questions. Okay, so these are questions about services? Okay.
I just wanted to ask you all or anyone here if my daughter's done a little bit of art therapy, and I just wonder if anyone, just for her social, emotional regulation, I mean, she just really struggles with regulating emotionally. And so we've done a little bit of art therapy, but I don't know. I just wanted to hear if anyone else had tried that.
My son hates all things art or fine motor skills, so we did not.
We did not try art therapy.
We didn't do that either.
What I think is interesting is hippotherapy and art therapy are no longer considered alternative therapies because they have now been shown clinically to work, where 15 years ago, absolutely not. And some insurance companies are even covering hippotherapy now. So,
Our county board helps us pay for the hippotherapy, so that's nice.
okay, that's awesome.
In regard to services, I wanted to actually just add a little bit to what you're saying based on my experience with Ivy, that as a single mom on a budget with one income, I have gone looking for services and funding and grants and programs, and I have found tremendous resources. We had a scholarship that you can get, with a genetic diagnosis, you can get a scholarship for the hippotherapy. Ivy had a scholarship for that. She got a scholarship for a swimming water therapy program as well. I went to our, again, to the Medicaid Cap C waiver in North Carolina. We got respite care and in-home care that's paid for based on my single mom income and her genetic diagnosis. We get a certain, number of hours allotted per week that is paid for by Medicaid for me to have respite care. And we have also tried the ABA. We went to Key Autism in Asheville. Again, that was covered by Medicaid. I'm not paying out of pocket for it. And because of the hurricane now, their office got flooded and destroyed, so they're sending now in-home care instead. So they're going to come to us and do, in-home ABA. We've had really great success with that. The other thing I would encourage parents to do in regard to finding resources, because I think more and more will become available, and I think also sharing the genetic diagnosis because of the rarity of it. I think more resources rather than less resources become available to you when you actually share that diagnosis. If you go to your local hospitals, if you go to look online for various state programs, and you go and ask about funding and grants. I found in North Carolina, a Rossi Fund grant that has given me $800 every time I want to come to the Wiedemann-Steiner Syndrome conference. They contribute to travel or lodging or conference registration. There are tons of those grants available, and there's tons of funding for special needs services, but nobody tells you what it is. You have to go, it's like a crazy learning path. You have to go find what it is. So I encourage everybody to go to the hospital, that's treating your child, go to the services where your child's getting treatment, and just always ask, do you have any grants available? Is there any funding for this? Do you have more resources you could tell me about? Do you have any tips for finding more resources? Do you think there's anything coming down the road that I should know about? Like that kind of stuff. I always ask, and never be afraid to ask. So that's just what I wanted to add to what you guys are already doing a great job of saying.
I'd like to propose that you do the next panel on finding services near us. Okay, any other questions about services? Okay, we have 6 minutes to talk briefly about medication. That's more than a 6-minute topic, I know. It can be a little controversial, a little awkward to talk about, but do any of you three, would you like to talk about what your journey has been with regard to medication?
We're a little bit of a pharmacy at home, but Allison has a lot of medications where Medicare and Medicaid comes in really handy because we'd be in the poorhouse otherwise. But respiratory medications, cardiac medications, a dietitian that really helps out with a lot of very specific problems dietarily wise that she has. I mean, even some mood medications with the anxiety and the OCD early on. I mean, all of that is extremely important, and what they said earlier today is very, very helpful. I mean, when you have a child that needs something, yeah, it's a struggle with a parent. Do we get them on this medication or not? But we've seen with Allie, without certain medications, her functionality would just not be there.
Yeah, with us for medications, my wife was strongly against it at the beginning, but it became almost desperation. We got to a point where anything that we could do that would help, what we would go for. So we ended up, unfortunately, before we had the WSS diagnosis, we tried so many different medications, but we were still seeing a lot of behavioral problems. That's probably going to happen with WSS kids regardless. So we would see a behavior and say, oh, it's not working, when really it had gotten much better, but we saw that he blew up again and we scrapped it. So it's been a constant thing, but right now we were on clonidine to kind of keep for ADHD, and then fluoxetine or Prozac for his anxiety. For those who do have behavioral problems or challenges, the Prozac has been a really good thing, but I think the behavioral piece really, when you've got the anxiety high and then the ADHD is like pouring gasoline on it, and you can just see this explosion happen sometimes. So yeah, so anyway, we're on guanfacine, and we scrapped the clonidine for guanfacine. It looks like the same thing, but the Prozac was the biggest help for us.
Is there any studies or going to be studies of like what medications work best with kids with WSS?
And Dr. Harris, who will speak later, she's been Parker's geneticist, but the bottom line is it's such a spectrum. All these kids are so unique that there's not a specific cocktail that you can just say this is going to work.
I know that on my radar, he has not seen someone to take medication for behaviors yet, but I've been thinking about the pharmacogenetics, which is basically they do a test to see what their body would respond to best, pharmacogenetics testing, and they weren't ready to do that because it's so complicated. He has to see a specialist apparently, so we're on a 18-month wait list for that. But he doesn't have many behavioral issues, but he has anxiety. So that's an option. But I think for any person, you don't know how your body's going to react to a medication. You have to try it. And I think they say, like 6 to 8 weeks before you notice? Yeah, right. And then if that doesn't work, they may try something else, and sometimes I think your body gets used to it and you may have to move on or go up in dose, that sort of thing. Yeah.
I'm actually going to have Christina answer your question because Christina's on the board.
I'll just say I think both Brian and Lisa answered that really well. In drug repurposing and how to treat for our kids is something on the research list that we want to talk to our experts about. But I will say just for thinking about visiting those clinicians who know our kids so well, just in our own personal case, I was able to go to Johns Hopkins. We were looking at a certain medication, and because they see so many of our kids, they're like, I'm going to try that because it is trial and error. And it worked the first time. So that helped in our case, but that's just a little bit of advice that I would give too.
And the other thing that we've noticed is at least Parker needs a higher dosage than the normal dosage because of WSS. So we would, before we had a true WSS doctor, they were prescribing him, but nothing would work. And then once we got the WSS doctor, she's like, oh, you got to double that. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now we're starting to see some effects. So.
Yeah.
Christina just said all these doctors are around today, so please avail yourself of them.
To go see them, yeah. I was just going to add that Riker's on growth hormones, so that was difficult to get, but he's been on it for 4 years. So if anybody has questions about that, we know that as well, and he has a G-tube, so if anybody has questions about that.
I was just going to say, I took my daughter to meet with Dr. Harris this summer, and she was wonderful because I live in Los Angeles and nobody knows anything, surprisingly. But anyway, she had like a 30-minute call with my daughter's psychiatrist because she said SSRIs they seem more
more help with those versus what my daughter was on. And so she does seem to have a lot of expertise and knowing what the good cocktail is, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's important that we kind of find out which doctors in this country are seeing all of these kids so we can go to them, because now they've seen 2 of us or something like that. And what Christina said is, if that happens, we can look at what the other kids, what's working for all of the other kids.
Sorry, Kirsten, you just triggered my soapbox, but we want the network to grow, so no matter what doctor our kids go in, they know WSS and we know how to treat them, so.
Do we have to wrap it up, Thor?
Yeah, we are at time. The last thing I was going to do is have you guys give all of us your tips, but it looks like probably we can do that at Mom's Night Out tonight and here in the lobby. I think these 3 are a wealth of information, but really a lot of the magic is happening right now in this discussion and in between sessions and tonight at the restaurant and the bar. So let's just keep this conversation going.